Hi everyone, we are live back at the State House after a week off. Hopefully everyone is rejuvenated. It's hard to drive in this morning, I must admit. I am Lori Hoku. I am the House Majority Leader and I represent Essex Junction. We have quite a few updates today. As everyone knows, we're in crossover week for policy. So more bills will be coming out. You saw on the calendar today, we had a long list on notice for tomorrow. 3 of those went to appropriations or ways and means. So that's going to be happening a lot over the next couple of days. So follow the calendar, but also follow what the speaker refers. So we know what's up on tap over the next week or 2 weeks, really. A couple reminders, days on the floor will start getting longer for a couple weeks, and then we'll go back to more time in committee. Because floor is longer, your committee time may start earlier or go later. So just know it's all in an effort to move forward good policy. So please pay attention to your committee calendar. Also remember to let us know, and everyone's doing a great job of this, of letting us know if you're going to be out of the building for any length of time. Again, floor times have moved on Wednesday and Thursday to 1 p.m. and that will most likely continue for the rest of the session. Crossover date, obviously this Friday for policy and next Friday for money. And I just want to remind people, because I've had a couple of conversations over break with some folks who thought that if a bill doesn't make it out by crossover, it's dead. That is not the case. We're in the first part of the biennium. Just because a bill doesn't make it to crossover doesn't mean there can't be action in committee on that bill throughout this whole year. It could move to the other chamber and come back to us next year. So nothing is dead at this point. And I think that's it for announcements. So we are back to talking about education everywhere we go. So I'm going to have Rep. Brady and Rep. Kornheiser come up. And it's helpful if, I hate to do this, but stand behind just for camera purposes.
Hello, Representative Brady from Williston and House Education. We are continuing to dig into the policy this week, next week, and most of the month, working through recommendations that have come over the last couple of years and from the field, from the Superintendent's Association, as we work towards efficiency, scale, bending the cost curve, but making change in a coherent way that does not do harm.
And just as a reminder, we do have a crossover
Yes.
waiver. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Extension.
Yeah.
Thank you for this bill.
Emily Kornheiser, Chair of Ways and Means from Brattleboro. So we are waiting to receive the policy bill from the Education Committee, and then we'll add our revenue taxation classification work to it. The 4 sort of pillars we're working under there is changes to property classifications, changes to property appraisals, changes to property tax credits, and changes to how money gets to districts, likely a foundation formula. As we have dug deeper into the numbers and the timeline for the work, following the work of the Education Committee, we are finding more sort of unaccounted for expenses. Those range from costs of districts for unemployment, if layoffs happen, right, to the unemployment trust fund. Those include costs to carry existing bond payments over. There are many, some of them are quite minor, but they're sort of adding up. And with the timeline we're looking at, I just want to remind folks, and I think there are a lot of people in this room who have had a chance to dive into some of the numbers of the foundation formula and how that sort of aligns with current costs, that likely we are not seeing cost savings from this proposal. What we are seeing is a stabilization of taxation and likely a stabilization of costs, which is a really important piece of trust between government and households, right? To know, to have sort of a predictable sense of what your bills are going to be this year, next year, and into the future. And that's what we're working on. And so as we do our the changes we're making to taxation, we're going to make sure that all of those dates sort of line up. So any disruptions that do happen to changes to property tax credits, to appraisals, to the way costs are distributed across the state from a change to a foundation formula. A reminder that under the foundation formula, there's an expectation of a single statewide property tax rate, a uniform one. And so that's going to likely be some changes around the state with some tax rates going down and some tax rates going up if all else stayed equal. And so we want to make sure that all of those changes all happen sort of simultaneously in order to minimize disruption. Because again, we want folks, students, families, schools, households, all better off on the other side of this, right? So that's the work that we're working on. Simultaneous to that, and actually what we're doing this week and next, and working on all of your other bills, is the yield bill, which is the one that actually sets our property taxes for this upcoming year, starting in July. And so I just don't want folks to lose track of that. In the midst of all of this exciting transformation work, we are also going to set property tax rates for this next year using our existing system. Any changes, we could move very fast and still we would not be making any changes to this upcoming property tax year. The budgets are warned. The majority of school budgets passed.
That was what I forgot to say. We have great news.
We have great news. So the majority of school budgets passed all over the state. A lot of hard work by school boards, by superintendents, by schools, by communities to really make that happen. Really grateful for it. And we'll be setting the yield accordingly this week and next. And we tend to do that work. Folks want to tune into something in specific. This afternoon, we have a joint hearing with Senate Finance all afternoon, and we're going to be focused on the yield. Thanks.
And the yield bill comes out, a policy crossover on the 21st.
No, the yield bill actually comes out on money crossover.
I mean, that's what I meant to say.
Yes.
On the 21st.
Is that the 21st? Sure. Next Friday, not this one.
Yes.
Whatever that date is.
Great. Any questions?
My name is Leanne Harkle. I guess I'm wondering, and maybe I just understand all this wrong, but if the majority of the school budgets pass, it seems like Vermonters are telling us that they support the majority of our schools. And so if we are not going to be lowering costs, we're only going to be stabilizing them. Do you have any advice for justifying why we would then close those schools after the majority of the budgets have passed and we receive this message of support?
I don't want to opine about the hypotheticals of why budgets passed this year and didn't pass last year. I think there are like so many factors taken into account, including just like how under attack folks feel from the national landscape. But what I will say is that we have tremendous inequality in the resources going to schools around the state right now. And I think no matter what, we need to do work to do something about that, regardless of whether school budgets pass or not. Those school budgets are passing or not at very different funding levels throughout the state. And I don't think that's fair to the kids on the deep low end.
And they passed largely, this year, which is fantastic, but, as Chair Kornheiser said, with a lot of really hard work by school boards, like that means cuts. There are deep cuts in our schools already this year. And so I think, from a coherence, stability standpoint for schools, that we do not want that to be the status quo, that the way to sort of get budgets passed every year and to survive is to plan for pretty deep cuts. We need coherence and stability in our system so that school leaders can do their work of being school leaders and focus on quality and students and student learning. So the bigger picture of work still certainly exists, but we're definitely in a different moment this, second week of March than we were the second week of March last year. And so, the House Ed Committee's well aware of that there is broad support for our schools, that most budgets passed, and we are working in that context now.
I got a follow-up. I guess I'm really concerned because when I went to all my town meetings, almost every single person who talked to me said that what they're interested in, what they thought the message they were sending us was to change the way that we're funding it and, you know, lower it or stabilize it, whichever is sort of is most possible at this moment, but not to change the structure of it. And so I'm just like really concerned that in trying to equalize it, I don't know what the question is, but that eliminating the schools for communities that said, please don't do it is not gonna make them feel like we supported that versus giving them the resources to certainly better. Right?
We have tried many times throughout our history to change the fiscal landscape without changing the policy landscape, or change the policy landscape without changing the fiscal landscape, and they really need to happen together to be effective. We can't lower property taxes and stabilize property taxes without making policy changes in our education delivery system.
You good, Leanne? I mean, you may not be good, but are you done? Let me rephrase that.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
It's just education. Is there any policy expected out of the education committees, either the Senate or the House, on cell phone usage?
Not before crossover, no. Candace had a.
Candace White from Waitsfield. So just following up on Rep. Kornheiser's comments about what you're looking at in Ways and Means and how that is stabilizing the property tax landscape. And I know everybody's really concerned about this new significant education reform proposal. So my assumption, and I just want you to tell me if I'm wrong, is that so your work on stabilization is going to coalesce with the work from the Committee on Education. And some of the cuts we're talking about in terms of teachers, I think we're talking about some cutting of teachers' jobs, some consolidation of buildings, et cetera. I mean, it will be kind of those cuts in the programming coalescing with stabilization in Ways and Means that will be achieving the significant cost savings in education reform. Am I following that correctly?
No matter how we model it, we are not looking at significant savings because the cost of transformation is significant. And so when everything is put together, we don't see significant savings over the next 5 years, maybe even over the next 10 years. That's why we're describing it as stabilizing costs, because we can stabilize the significant growth curve and the instability in the growth that we are seeing right now.
Thank you. And that is a little concerning. Yeah, thank you. So you're awesome from Public Tester. I just want to clarify, when you say we told the public that we would work on affordability and sustainability. And what I'm hearing when you say stabilization, is that the same as sustainability?
I would call it affordability and sustainability.
But it sounds like we kind of achieved that, or we're on a good path to achieving sustainability.
I think if we are able to finish the work that we intend to do, and the Senate goes along with our plans, and the governor signs the bill, and the Agency of Education and the Department of Taxes delivers on their commitments in that work, and the federal landscape. And I don't like, I'm not trying to be blind, but like, there's a lot of other factors there. Then yes, we are on that path indeed. And so right now I'd say we are on that path, but I don't want to promise a finish line to yet.
Thank you.
2 more and then take to move on. Is there any more? Oh, I thought other people had enough, but no more. Thank you both very much. And I just want to add, I think we need to remember we are turning a really big ship, right? And a proposal was put out that is very large and does a lot with suggested savings that when we dive into everything is not as it appears. And so the committees have to do the hard work of getting to what is reality and what we can do and how many years it might take us. So I think we just need to set those expectations amongst ourselves and amongst our constituents. But I applaud the committee's work, and hopefully everyone is paying attention to what they're doing. And as questions arise or concerns arise, don't hesitate to reach out to them or to leadership. Thank you. And we're going to stick to the education theme, and Representative Graney is going to come up and talk to us about some of the work Thomas is doing on CTE. This is part of a multi-committee work on education. It doesn't just all fall on the education committee.
Hi, Lee Kang from Jericho. So Commerce has joint jurisdiction over technical education with the Education Committee because of the workforce development piece. And so there's a big workforce piece. Right now we have 4 different governance models for technical education in Vermont. We're looking at simplifying that to one model, and we're looking at figuring out how to make it work and how much time it's going to take to actually make it work. So we started that last week. We're going to keep working on it. It's going to be folded into this bill that everybody was just talking. Okay. So it's that.
Okay.
I was just going to mention one other quick thing, that we are also looking at simplifying, streamlining the way that businesses register in Vermont. We're working with Secretary of State to do that. And so that is another bill that will be coming out later this week.
Okay. Any questions? Maybe. Okay. Thank you. Great. We're going to switch to judiciary and have Ian come up. So there's 2 bills on the floor this week. Are you doing both?
Yeah. No. Someone else is doing 21.
Okay, so H105 is expanding youth awareness safety program.
Oh, but I can present.
Okay, but he's going to present on the.
Sorry, I apologize.
Excellent. Let him take over.
Yeah, so we'll do 21 first and then 105.
Perfect.
So H21 is an act relating to service of writs of possessions. So pretty exciting stuff. What's a writ of possession? It's a civil order that gives a landlord possession back of a property from a tenant. You go through a whole civil process to get there. The writ's kind of like the end of the process. So if you look at H21, it's fairly simple. What we're talking about is the jurisdiction of sheriffs for serving writs of possession. Right now in statute, the only sheriff that can serve writs of possession are sheriffs that are within the county where the property exists. That's kind of wonky, and it doesn't flow with the rest of the laws around sheriff jurisdiction. Sheriffs have statewide jurisdiction, and they have a lot of other responsibilities that they execute, and they can do it anywhere. But in this particular instance, in this one area, writs of possessions can only be served by the sheriff where the property is, in the county where the property is. So H21 seeks to remedy that and allow any sheriff from any county to serve a writ of possession anywhere in the state. And that's it. It's fairly simple. I'm happy to take questions on
The
it.
vote was.
Oh, I'm sorry. The vote was, I should have brought that with me. It was unanimous. Yes. And we took testimony from the sheriffs and from judiciary, and everyone was in favor of this language.
Great. Any questions on H21?
You, Candace White, Waitsfield. Can you just clarify, so this writ of possession is something that a landlord delivers to a tenant? Just go back to that.
Yeah. So the sheriff is the one who serves the writ, and the writ comes from the court. It is.
It is ejecting a tenant from just go back to that.
Yeah, it serves the purpose of getting the property back in possession of the landlord. But it's at the end of a process that has already occurred. So you're not going to get a writ of possession executed by the court, given to you by the court, until you've gone through the rest of the process. And so it's all really what H21 is doing, is talking about how does that writ go from the court and get served and give proper notice to the tenant that's in the property. Yeah.
Hi, Representative Charlie Gill, Woodstock. So again, just a question, was it an omission or error that the delivery of the road possession was only from the county, or was it intentional in statute before? So was it a mistake before we're correcting it, or was it intentional and now we're making it to a line?
That is an excellent question. We did not really get into the history of why, in this particular instance, jurisdiction for sheriffs in serving writs of possession was held to counties. I would imagine, I'm not going to speculate. I want to speculate, but I'm not going to. So I'm not sure if it was an error, or I'd like to think that my past legislatures didn't make errors, but they made decisions and we don't know quite why that decision was made. But I think what's important is that the sheriffs are coming to us asking to align this language with the rest of their jurisdictional power, which is cross state.
Thanks.
All right, and we have one more, sorry, Amy. Topic.
I'm glad that this one's getting.
Amy Sheldon, Millbrae. I guess I'm just missing the why. What's the problem you're trying to solve here?
Yeah, so there are instances where you've got people who are trying to get a writ served, but they have to go, and like, I don't want to speak from my experience, but you basically are, for this particular situation, you got to get the sheriff in the county that the property is in right now to get this, what's that?
That seems like who you would get. So where's the glitch in the system?
Well, that if you had a situation where you weren't getting a response from the sheriff that you're trying to get to serve the writ, you couldn't go to anyone else to get the writ executed. We also heard some testimony, a pretty interesting fact pattern where you have the sheriff serve a writ on someone who is incarcerated. And if the facility where the individual was incarcerated was in a different county, theoretically, under the current law, you would need to have the sheriff where the property is drive to the facility to serve the writ on the incarcerated individual. So, for example, for me, I'm in Winham County, and if you had somebody up in northeastern correctional facility, I'd have to pay Sheriff Anderson a lot of mileage to go up to serve him. Now, if I don't know if that's exactly how it's happening currently, but to actually have the law reflect what's happening in practice, I think is important.
Great. And again, it was unanimous, correct?
Yeah, and I think the last thing to say is that also it's the one place where everything else sheriffs have is jurisdiction across the state. And so restricting them in this one instance is odd.
Thank you. All right, H105.
Oh, okay, H105. So this is expanding the youth substance awareness safety program for additional youths, specifically those who are charged with impaired driving violations. So right now, the YSASP, Youth Substance Abuse Safety Programming, is available for youths who have a variety of violations around alcohol, like possession, purchasing, things like that. But it doesn't involve currently impaired driving. And so what H105 seeks to do is pull in a 0.02 violation. So when a youth basically blows 0.02 above while driving or in actual possession of a vehicle, then they would be in violation of this new statute, and they would have to potentially have to go through the YSASP program. So to walk you kind of through what it looks like, it's a pretty significant shift in how this would work, because the committee through amendment has kind of created a carrot stick structure. So if a youth were to violate this statute as amended and blew a 0.02 or above, they would have a immediate suspension of their license for 90 days. So nothing, they're not going to get any, there's no way to sort of remove that. And then they are ordered to go to the YSAS program. And if they fail to go through the YSAS program, they don't do it at all, or they're not able to complete it, then they'll have an additional suspension of their license for 180 days. For a second violation of this same statute, you'd have a immediate suspension of your license for 145 days. And if you fail to complete the YSAS program, you would have an additional suspension of your license for a year or until you're 21, whichever is longer. So it's a fairly, there was a lot of discussion in committee about the length of times for suspensions because, we have an opportunity at this moment when you've got a youth pulled over and they are both drinking underage and they're also driving, where we're trying to show the severity of that crime, but also we want to move those youths towards programming that's actually structured towards them. So right now, if a youth were to get a DUI, they could go through IDRP, which is the Impaired Driving Rehabilitation Programming. IDRP isn't really structured for youths. It's like for adults. And so we heard a lot of testimony about having youth who are found guilty of impaired driving to have them actually go towards programming that's related to them. Finally, there's a couple other things in it, but the other thing that's important for H105 is that it has some reporting back to this legislature in the beginning in October of 2026 from the relevant entities who are involved, including the AG's office, about how this program is working, specifically for the length of time of suspensions, based a little bit on our own committee's sort of back and forth on how long we should be suspending people to see what they're seeing on the ground once it's implemented.
Great. And then a vote?
Unanimous again?
I think
No,
it was 812.
812. I should have come with that information. I apologize.
No worries. All right, questions?
So the
Hold on,
focus,
Jess. Hold on. You need the microphone for people who are listening in. And
So the focus is specifically alcohol. When you say impaired driving, you just mean alcohol.
Correct. And one thing, this also would lower the age that for anybody who, so those other violations like possession, purchasing, that kind of stuff, it's going to lower the age from 16 down to 12. So more people are also going to be eligible for YSAS. And that's not really as related to the impaired driving part, but it would just, yeah.
Emily and Doug.
hi. I am somewhat coincidentally aware of the fact that in the county that I live in, that you happen to live in too, there is
Yeah, we're going there.
a huge percentage of the youth with alcohol offenses are out of state youth here on vacation. And I'm curious how the suspension work in that context.
Mm-hmm. So suspension of your license in Vermont, if you have an out-of-state license, is should be reported to the state where you are. And as far as if you wanted to get your license reinstated in Vermont, you would need to go through the YSAS program, or you would need to suffer the longer penalty. Yeah.
Doug Bishop, Colchester. I was wondering if there was any committee discussion on whether the length of suspension or other penalties involved may differ depending on the blood alcohol content. 0.02 to 0.08, one penalty, 0.08 and above, different penalties.
So the answer is no, but it opens up a good point, which is that we are talking civil and we're talking 0.02 charge. That does not preclude the state from also charging somebody with a DUI. So if you got this charge, you could also get a criminal DUI charge, you get a civil DUI, and you'll see in there that the penalties and suspensions that the individual may suffer, they're going to run all together. So if you had a suspension under a civil under this point of two, but also you have a UI, you're gonna have those different suspensions. And I think I bring that up because that's sort of, we're going back to the prosecutor's role here, right? They're gonna look at how high the blood alcohol content was and make a determination whether, okay, is YSAS and this programming more appropriate, or should I be charging this individual with the DUI, or both?
Great, any other questions? Karen's getting her workout today.
Brother Christie Moore Springfield, and that was my reason for having a walkway over here. We all need extra exercise. And, not saying you do. And, what we're gonna do is we're lowering the age to 12. And I heard that we're gonna suspend their license for a period of time.
Yes.
They're not eligible now.
So as I mentioned, and I did mention it later in my after an answer, so I apologize for the confusion. So we're lowering the age to 12 for all of those violations. So not just the driving one, but the possession, the consumption, purchasing, that stuff. So, the idea being here, there are youth who are experimenting with alcohol earlier, and we want to make sure that we can capture those people and make sure that they're able to go into programming that's appropriate for them, not if they're under age 16.
So I understand that, appreciate it, but I'm just trying to make the logic out of suspending a license for something that doesn't happen. They're still going to be subjected to fine, right?
Yeah, there are a bunch. So you mean specifically if they were driving, they didn't have a license? Yeah. So I guess that's a pretty specific situation. But what you're seeing is that the age is reflecting all of the subdivisions of that section.
Thank you.
Last one.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Burrows and I represent Windsor One, and I'm from West Windsor. I was wondering whether in the course of the discussion of this bill, whether you learned anything about the breakdown of the DUI, the adolescent DUI population, whether alcohol is the #1 5, or whether other substances are up there, and the #1 killer of children being cars.
Sorry, is the #1 what?
Killer of children being cars.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know if we heard testimony. I don't believe we heard testimony specifically about the numbers, but what we did hear testimony about is that youth involved in alcohol and driving is a serious concern in Vermont, and there are a number of youth who are being charged with crimes related to that. And so getting them access to the programming that's going to help them not reoffend is really important. But I can try to get numbers for you between now and tomorrow if you'd like.
I can look at it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Ian. I'm gonna send this bill to my son who just got his driver's license.
Yeah.
Robin? So before we left for break, the conference committee on the BAA reached a resolution. The Senate has already voted it out, and so it will be on our floor tomorrow. Remember, it is an up and down vote. Debate is allowed, but it is an up or down vote. So with that.
Okay,
Can you introduce yourself?
thank you. Robin Scheid from Middlebury, Chair of House Appropriations Committee. I actually am going to talk to you about 3 things related to the budget adjustment since I have the floor and you're all. So the first is a few of the changes that we agreed on with the Senate that are, I think, are important ones. I want to talk to you a little bit about the governor's counter proposal to GA housing that was presented to the conference committee the Friday before we left on break. And then also just let you know a little bit about what would happen if we don't have a BAA or it's not passed by April 1st, because I think that's on people's minds too. So the Senate agreed with a lot of what we did, the majority of what we did. They did a couple of other things. We agreed with a lot of what they did. And so there was just really a few things that we had conference committee on. And as you may know, when something leaves the House and it goes to the Senate, they get more information. So often things change because they have information that we didn't have when we had the bill in our position in the House. So one of the things that they did, you may recall the $14 million that was going to go back to the treasurer. It was part of a whole, several years ago, that the House, the legislature appropriated $20 million for the treasurer to use to buy down debt early and save a little bit of money. Turns out that's not fiscally responsible to be doing. We had the treasurer in. So the 14 million that was going back to the treasurer, we held and used for a number of things, mostly housing related. And then the Senate said, oh, that sounds like a good idea. There's still $6 million left in that, of that 20. We'll take the other 6. But they only had uses for 2 million of it. So what we negotiated was that we agreed to the 2 million that they wanted to use for things. So that money is being used for 2 positions for the Human Rights Commission, which is severely understaffed for a couple of months, which means that we then have to fund it for all of fiscal year 26. So they'd be getting 2 new positions. A second position for the Attorney General's office. They need several positions, but one of them is to fight lawsuits, again, based on what Washington is doing. And there seem to be a lot of those. They had 5 in the first month, there was more. So they needed an attorney to help them out with that. We thought that was a good idea. And the third was $1.8 million for grants to municipalities impacted by floods. And so this was something that we started last year. Some of it got lost and some things didn't happen. And I won't go into all the details. But the fact is that we're now going to use this money and use it the same way we did this last year, with a certain dollar amount going to communities based on their population size. And it's anywhere from $10,000 to $75,000. My town happened to be one that was supposed to get money last year and didn't. They thought that we only needed, well, we turned out we needed 350,000 in Middlebury for whatever it was. And they only had 200,000. So instead of giving us the 200,000, they gave us nothing. So anyway, we're not getting 350,000 either, but we're getting something. So all the communities that need to are getting something there. So that was good use of that $2 million. We also provided this came up when the Senate had it, 220,000 to the treasurer's office for emergency personnel survivor benefits fund. A year ago, we increased the dollar amount from 50,000 to 80,000. And then it hasn't been used much, but very sadly, there have been 3 instances where that money is now needed and there wasn't enough money in there for that. So we have transferred in the budget adjustment, we would be transferring 220,000 for that. So those are kind of some of the main things that are happening. You may have read that we were getting ready, we were planning to sign Friday morning, and the administration came to the committee of conference and said, we really don't like the GA housing program. Budget adjustment isn't for new programs and new policies. But we have a new program to give you instead. All we were doing was extending the dates by 3 months for $1.8 million. The administration came to us and said, we'll give you 2.1 million, $300,000 more than the 1.8. And what we are proposing to do is make community grants directly to municipalities in a proportional allocation with a small town minimum. And they could use the money for administrative costs, to hire staff, to keep people in the GA hotel program, to find them other shelters, to give them a bus ticket to go to their family in some other state. There would be total flexibility for that. So this was the proposal that they offered us. And so we said, have you talked to the municipalities yet? No. We said, what's the liability that the towns and municipalities would have if they were to take over this program as of April 1st? Well, we're not sure about that either. So they, and then we said, and then what happens July 1st? Well, they'd come back to the GA program. So it didn't make a lot of sense to us for all kinds of reasons that we would be doing this. 300,000 more dollars, basically dumping it on municipalities with maybe 2 weeks for them to organize this. I don't think they're going to be able to hire staff, figure out the program, track it all, and do all the administrative work, and then do that for 3 months and give it back to the state. And by the way, there was not a lot of liability. So, in an unusual, we don't usually take testimony in committees of conference, but because of this situation, we took testimony from the administration. We also asked the Vermont League of Cities and Towns to come in and talk to us because we wanted to hear from the municipalities, and they were not at all supportive of this for all the reasons that you can imagine. They don't have time. This is getting dumped on them. They don't have the staff. They can't do this in 2 weeks. And then it all goes away. So it was going to be a whole new program for 3 months, and it didn't seem to make sense. So we stuck with our program, and that's what's in the Budget Adjustment Act. And if this, so then the question is, what happens in April if we don't have a Budget Adjustment Act, or if we don't have one at all? So we had data, general assistance, emergency housing data, the hotel motel program through February 28th. There would be 466 children who could have possibly no housing. There would be dozens of veterans that don't have housing. At the time, there were a total of 1,434 rooms being used. So there could be that sort of outpouring of people on the streets that don't have housing if we don't do this April 1st. But it's not just about the GA housing where we have some issues. There is, without the BAA, there's a significant adjustment in Medicaid and long-term care. We're talking 125 million that we had to do because of utilization. Without that, without having this approved, the Human Services Agency's spending authority will run out before June 30th, and they may not be able to make the payments. There'd be no money for the stabilization grants for the providers that are struggling. There's also another 24 million for nursing homes. Some of them are on the verge of collapse, and that we have money in here for emergency relief, financial relief for those. The vets home may have some problems meeting their obligations. And so those are just some of the key big items that we're talking and why we need to have a budget adjustment act.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
There's mud.
Great. Okay, that's fine. Hold on, wait, get some microphone.
Hello, Jonathan Greenberg, I think it's one, the town of Powell. I'd like to ask a little bit about sort of understanding the landscape for any parliamentary activities that may take place tomorrow, with respect to amendments and what we might expect and where from.
So you cannot amend a committee of conference report, and this is why sometimes we use that approach. A committee of conference report is a straight up or down vote. So there are no amendments. There can be as much debate as people want to have or don't want to have, but at the end of the day, it's just a straight up or down vote.
That will be a roll call vote or each one now.
I'm thinking it may not be, but we don't know for sure. I mean, anybody can call a roll call. I can't promise not. Just be there.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, please, at 1.
Great, any other questions? Great, thank you so much. All right, and we're going to end with 2 bills coming out of environment. So Kate, let's start with you. I think this is on 3-acre stormwater. And welcome to the caucus. Thank you. You can just introduce yourself and then.
Kate Logan, from Chittenden 16 in Burlington. So I'm gonna go over the 3-acre rule bill that we're about to pass out of House Environment. The bill is, Committee Bill 25-0967. So, it proposes to amend current statute on stormwater management system permitting for impervious surfaces that were enacted in Vermont Clean Water Act 64 of 2015 and subsequent amendments. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the current law and then talk about why we're doing this bill. So the Clean Water Act was adopted in response to the EPA's requirement for a new TMDL, total maximum daily load for phosphorus reduction and the Clean Water Act pertinent to 3-acre rule was then further updated in 2022. Clean Water Act in general was had a broad scope, an all-in approach to reducing phosphorus from a range of sources, including from stormwater runoff on impervious surfaces, roads, farms, river corridor erosion, and forests. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, TMDL, or total maximum daily load, in this case is the amount of phosphorus that is allowed to enter water from all existing sources on a daily basis in order to maintain optimal water quality or adequate water quality. And then for the bill that we're talking about today, the more narrow focus is on the stormwater management section of the Clean Water Act. So in this case, stormwater management systems are in place to regulate the phosphorus that's present in stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces. This is a non-point source reduction. The Clean Water Act and subsequent legislation amended the Agency of Natural Resources Authority to regulate stormwater and clarified the activities that require a stormwater permit. And the even more specific focus for this bill is on something we're calling the 3-acre rule. So this new requirement from the Clean Water Act stated that permits are required for impervious surfaces. So permits would entail the retrofitting of old impervious surface or an impact fee. For any impervious surface of 3 or more acres that were never permitted or were permitted under pre-2002 permit standards. So just to be clear, impervious surface is man-made surfaces like roads, parking lots, roofs, driveways, and walkways where precipitation runs off rather than soaking into the ground. Let's see. Currently, the law requires an implementation schedule of October 2023 for all identified sites in couple lake watersheds or other identified stormwater impaired waters, and then October 2033 implementation date for the rest of the state. The permit requires that each site implement a technically feasible stormwater management system that satisfies criteria from the Stormwater Management Manual. The Clean Water Act also established the Clean Water Special Fund, including funds that includes funds from meals and rooms tax, a clean water surcharge on the property transfer tax, and unclaimed water bottle deposits. And from that fund, the Agency of Natural Resources has so far administered $60 million to support 3-acre sites, including schools, manufactured housing communities, private and municipal sites, public-private partnerships, and agricultural fairs. So why this bill? So first I want to say that this bill doesn't propose to substantially amend our state's approach to nutrient runoff management. Aside from our general need to use and enjoy clean water, good water quality is essential for drinking water, swimming, and fishing. Good water quality is also essential to Vermont's economy. Good water quality is part of our appeal in Vermont and contributes to significant tourism revenue and the maintenance of property values for properties near the lake. Stormwater runoff regulation continues to be crucial, especially as we experience more rain. And in addition to managing phosphorus runoff, phosphate runoff, stormwater management contributes to managing other nutrient runoff such as sediment, metals, petroleum-based hydrocarbons, and other pollutants. So the problem that this bill is solving in the context of that larger 3-acre rule in the current Clean Water Act is the need for more time for property owners and municipalities to comply with the law. The need for more municipal involvement in addressing stormwater runoff, and the need to consider alternative governance models for stormwater management. So this bill will do several things. It's going to give more time to comply with the law, given the complexity and cost of these projects. It extends the permitting deadline from 2023 to 2028 for the most crucial areas. And then it makes some changes to the funding for 3-acre sites. First, it's going to empower municipalities to raise their own funds to pay for municipally managed stormwater systems that fall under the permitting requirements of the 3-acre rule. Is also going to maintain an important source of state revenue that funds clean water projects. So I mentioned that there's a clean water surcharge on the property transfer tax that was set to sunset. So we're repealing the sunset. And then finally, regarding funding, it will extend grant funding opportunities for 3-acre permit renewals. So not just the initial permit, but also the renewal that generally has to happen within 5 years of the initial permit being granted. And it will also allow grants for municipalities that assume responsibility for stormwater management systems. And then finally, regarding governance, there will be a study into whether or not we should be creating regional stormwater utility districts to facilitate compliance with water quality laws. So these entities would or could take responsibility for compliance off the hands of municipalities and regionalize that responsibility. And so there's a study on that. No action.
Okay. And so it hasn't been voted yet, but it's.
Nope, we'll take more testimony on it today.
Okay, great. Questions?
Hi there, so I have had constituents from, I guess, a wide range of circumstances, financial circumstances and neighborhood circumstances come to me about this bill. And I just want to make sure that if I'm understanding correctly, that the changes, well, not this bill, but about the 3-acre stormwater rule. So it sounds like the changes in this bill are not seeking to really provide financial assistance to the majority of property owners. I know that some residents in manufactured home communities are able to access some assistance. But for instance, you know, a neighborhood of 200 homes, you know, with no income sensitized anything, will just have to work through their homeowners association to comply with this law, which is what's been happening. So I just want to be really clear that the basic lay of the land is not changing, and that these individual homeowners working through their many of which are working through some version of a homeowners association or a co-op, will still be required to figure out how to pay for this.
I'll answer this and then I'll probably need that from you. So there are a couple ways, we've heard testimony along those lines as well. It is an unfortunate reality of environmental policy that we're usually addressing decisions that were made by people a long time ago that turn out to be bad decisions now we know. And often they're very costly to address after the fact. But the changes that we are making right now would, for example, incentivize a municipality to take full legal responsibility, perhaps, for the stormwater management system that needs to be permitted for the impervious surface in that community, raise its own funds and receive grants from the state out of this clean water fund, which we will continue to supply with funds from the clean water surcharge on the property transfer tax and other funding sources. So there will be ongoing resources available. Plus, private landowners are eligible for funds from the state. Can't remember what the acronym means, POA. It's, anyway, there's some kind of financial support. I could find out the actual term for that. But that has been a smaller portion of the funding that has been awarded by the state to help folks make these changes, but it's available.
So if I may.
Yeah.
I guess the way I'm looking at this is the things that you just, yeah, sorry, Amy Sheldon, represented from Middlebury. We are, first of all, sort of pumping the brakes a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna rewind and say that, all the property owners who have gotten their permits and moved forward have generally, I think it's safe to say, received public financing. So there's been public financing available for private property.
And is really everywhere and is causing a lot of issues. And we have since been starting to regulate it and ban it from a variety of different kinds of products. We did pass a bill last year that prohibited PFAS in a list of products that particularly easy to end up in your body and where there are alternative products to use. That Act 31 that was passed last year also had ANR deliver us a report that we received earlier this year that outlined what it might look like to have a full regulatory system for consumer products based within the agency of ANR. The prohibitions that were passed under Act 31 are to be set up under the Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's, the title that governs consumer protections under the Attorney General's office. So we did receive ANR's report and a draft bill of what it would look like to create a whole regulatory structure where
manufacturers would have to really engage in a regulatory system to get products approved. We did not move forward on that bill after getting a variety of different kinds of testimony. There are only 2 other states who have set up a regulatory system like that for PFAS, Maine, and I believe it's Minnesota. And that's pretty recent. A number of other states have done bans like we have done so far on certain products with certain timelines to get them out of to get manufacturers to switch the kinds of chemicals they use in manufacturing. So what we're doing with this bill that we haven't voted on it yet. We may vote on it this afternoon out of the House Environment, so you may see it on the floor in a couple of days. This bill will add 3 types of products to the list of prohibited products under the Consumer Protection Division. And then it also asks the Agency of Natural Resources to continue to bring us some more information in years to come about consumer products and complex durable goods, which have many, many elements to them, as well as looking at how to address PFAS in food down the road. So I would just say that PFAS we're learning a lot about it. It is all across our manufacturing and our environment at this point. We have a number of bills on our wall that address PFAS in other ways that may take up at another time. This really just takes one more step forward on consumer products that may not have PFAS in them and sets deadlines for those in the years to come and a structure to do that. So we thank our Human Services Committee, which did the work last biennium on PFAS, and we've just been building on that work. We did have their committee do a drive-by this morning, and they were also pleased with how the bill was progressing. And so you will probably see this in a few days. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to specifically add. There's a lot of detail in the bill. I'm happy to talk with anybody about it outside of now, because I'm sure we all want to get to lunch.
Any questions?
Yeah, that's right, great still. Alex, you mentioned there are 3 products that you're adding to your list. Could you share what those products are?
Yes, I will. And I'll also share with you some of the products that were banned last year. So last year, some of the items that we banned were aftermarket stain and water resistant treatments, artificial turf, cookware, incontinency protection products. This is last year's list. Juvenile products, which is a very wide range of items, rugs and carpets, ski wax and textiles. This year, we're adding cleaning products, dental floss, and fluorinated containers, which if you want to talk about fluorinated containers, I encourage you to see me later.
Any other questions? My husband is going to be so excited. He's on a kick now about dental floss. It's great. Great, thank you, Ella. One more thing before we go, I failed to say, tomorrow there's a couple rallies, different rallies happening in the State House and outside of the State House. So it's going to be probably a busy, full packed day. If there's any questions or concerns, definitely see leadership. Thanks, everyone, and